Let's talk about fighting joy, ecstasy, happiness, and gratitude. So I'll start off with the friction point for this video. I've started doing a 15-minute breathing exercise in the morning and evening that simply consists of setting a timer. First, I set the timer for 15 minutes. And by the way, and say hello to Philip, who's joining us this morning. And I noticed that immediately I would set the timer. I would then remember I had something to do that would take about 2 minutes. So then I set the timer for 17 minutes so that I could set the timer and then remember something that I needed to do and do it without having to fiddle with the timer. But the point was not to go do something. The point was to shorten the meditation, right? So as soon as I set the timer for 17 minutes, that was no longer an effective way to avoid joy. Now, I think it's worth mentioning that the ecstasy, the peace, the sense of well-being that I felt in the first few breathing meditations is, arguably, in the top 1% of 1% of well-being in years, right? So we're talking about the 1% of the 1% of joy and happiness. Now, it's free. It's easy. It doesn't take time. 15 minutes compared to binge watching and angsting and forgetting things and, buying things that I don't need and stuff. 15 minutes is absolutely nothing. So it doesn't take time. It's free. I can do it anywhere. I usually do it on the floor. And so what is the basis for what I would call the defense system to protect against undue amounts of joy? And, I would say, just to kind of complete the sequence of defenses. So first was when it was working really, really well the first few times, the first thing was to immediately, get up and do something else as soon as I put the timer. The next defense was to tighten my muscles, right? So that I couldn't feel joy, right? To get really tight, right? The next defense was to kind of wander around and just not feel like doing it, all right? I don't want to feel ecstatically happy for free as the highlight of my year. No, maybe this, I don't want to do it right now, right? So that was the next defense. So then I would wander around, do other things, and then it's like, well, it's on my list, I've got to go do it. And so I would do it. The next defense, and by far the most effective, is to start thinking about other thoughts. And so here's where a mantra comes in, like breathe in, I, breathe out, am, breathe in, here, breathe out, now, and just repeat that. It's very, very simple. Easiest thing in the world. No extra effort, just to repeat a very simple thing. This felt ecstatic. So I quickly forgot the mantra, right? And began ruminating, right? And so then I thought, well, maybe I can ruminate on positive things, which worked. But then I quickly began ruminating on negative things, which didn't work, right? I played with my dog, which works, but then I start holding my breath, and that doesn't work, right? And So then I began moving my arms to hold my attention like that, which worked very well. So I just tuned out the whole experience and kind of shut down because it might be too joyful, which it was, right? And finally, when I would forget or kind of just lose track, I breathed more intensely in order to hold awareness, which worked very well until I distracted myself with a thought and suddenly stopped breathing and held my breath, right? Now, keep in mind that the first 3 times I did this breathing meditation, it worked perfectly, effortlessly, joyfully. And I'm like, yes, this is it, right? This is so great. Why didn't I try breathing meditation before, right? So that was the first 3 times. So we're not dealing with a situation where I'm attempting brain surgery, and the first 100 patients I unfortunately mutilated as I'm learning the ins and outs of the brain, and then gradually I'm getting better, and this is a very difficult skill to learn. And it just takes, lots of knowledge and study and, and dexterity in order to get it right. We're talking about breathing for free, sitting on the floor with any mantra that I feel like making up for 15 minutes, right? So this now is creating this kind of movement here where part of me is like, well, let's do more of that. And part of me is like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to make sure that I have a lower and lower quality of experience every single time. And I would say that I've been very successful at the latter, right? I would say that after doing this for 3 weeks, I am now incredibly efficient at sitting there for 17 minutes and drifting off for 5 minutes, breathing rapidly and not holding an attention for maybe 5 minutes, thinking about negative thoughts for about 3 minutes, and getting close to joy for the remaining few minutes. There's like seconds at a time where it's like, oh, this is so easy, and then I will divert energy or change the protocol or hold my breath until that feeling of joy goes away. And then I will power through the remaining meditation. So the question is, who is this one that is so committed to attacking joy, right? Because that's the common theme, right? We cannot get too joyful. And I think that it's the antibodies of the identity immune system, right? I have an identity. I have a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that I, the ego, identifies with, hold on to, and say, that's me. I am that. And if there's a change in that identity, in that pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, the ego says, wait a minute, that's not me, right? No one's going to tell me what to do. I have a pattern. That's me. I think this, I feel this. And nobody's going to tell me what to think. I think this. Now, to hold a pattern in a changing ecology, that we require an immune system. We require antibodies, right? We don't, most of us, vote Democrat one day, Republican the next day, go to this church the next day, that church the next day, and just say, well, I am a jumbled mix of conflicting thoughts and feelings and all this stuff, and I just change all the time, and I have no real identity. I am not a Republican. I was on Wednesday. I'm not on Thursday. I'm not a believer. I'm not a disbeliever. I don't eat the same food I don't know who I am, right? I don't know who I am, right? Sometimes I think this, sometimes I think that. So it's very confusing, right? And I don't know what to do, because should I do what this thought says or that says thought? And so there, we can descend into schizophrenia. We can disintegrate as a pattern, and there's all these various things. And then who am I? Am I this group and that? And the ego wants to hold on to something. And so we do our best. Usually it defaults to the family system, which is a microcosm of the cult or culture. And from there, we maybe iterate. Well, I'm not going to do what the cult says here. I'm going to change that to this. And that's my identity. I believe in this. Like my parents didn't believe in that, but I do. So this is my new identity, my new pattern, right? And I am holding on. That's me. Nobody's going to change me. Nobody's going to tell me what to think, what to do. Of course, we all tell each other what to think and what to do. And the I has to choose one of them, right? And then it says, that's me, right? I like what that person says, so that's me, right? And then, but in order to maintain some sense of sanity, we have to then say, well, those things are not me. Because one of the phenomena of the ego is that whatever we pick, whatever the identity is that we hold on to, it precludes 99% of reality, right? If I believe that this is, America is the best country, well then 200 countries, are not the best country, the other countries, right? So, or if I wear a blue shirt, then I'm not wearing any of the other colors. This is me. I am the one who wears the blue shirt, right? So the identity, the pattern, differentiates itself by being different. All these other things are now different. And I'm this, and everything else is that. And now I know who I am. I'm this. Now, most of our identities, though, most of our patterns, are not filled with joy, are not filled with ecstasy, do not have the exuberance of a dog, the playfulness of a cat. They're not relaxed. They're stress identities. They're survival identities. Got to do this so that I can do that, so that I can do that, so that I don't make a fool of myself. I've got to do this, I've got to do that. So the patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being are often traumatic residue, cultural inheritance, family system, coping mechanisms, and they're miserable. But they're solid. They're miserable, but they're solid. They're familiar, family, but they're miserable. Most families are miserable. So if you have a familiar identity, it will be a miserable identity most of the time. And by contrast, right, we don't have a lot of examples of ecstatic breathing, for example, right? So that's not me, right? So the ego is afraid of the unknown. Death for the ego lies in the unknown. With change comes death, comes being out of control, comes the unknown. So the ego is committed to fighting the unknown, to fighting change, to fighting death in order to hold on to its identity, right? Identity, right? I attach to the pattern. So here comes joy along, and suddenly I'm starting to feel grateful. I'm starting to feel, but that doesn't fit the identity. The identity has bitterness, has self-pity, has cynicism, has disgust, has irritation, has dissatisfaction. I'm not satisfied with the amount of time that it took the waiter to do this and that. And I don't like that. And the corruption here is this. The identity is filled with criticism, right? Not gratitude. The identity is filled with judgment. That's not the way to do things. This is the way to do things. Right? That's not the way to do things. This is the way to do things. So the identity is filled up with all these things. But saying this is the way to do things and that's not the way, that doesn't feel joyful. That's not identity. It's not a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that creates joy. There's not a lot of joy in the cult identity. So, what's the ego to do when joy is creeping in? What's the ego to do when joy is creeping in and messing with the pattern, with the code, the sacred code that defines who I am? It's got to keep it out. Like, no, get that over here, quick. Get him over here. There's too much joy coming in, right? Block it. Block the dike. Get it out. Water. Get it. Bucket it out. That's not who we are. We are skeptical. We are cynical. We're smart. Right? We're sarcastic, right? That's the identity. I admire this sarcastic wit over here and this and that and that. That's the identity, right? And too much joy coming in. Get it out, right? Quick, don't do this. Oh gosh. Think about this. So I will literally jump around in order to avoid joy. I guess joy is coming in, jump over here, jump over here. I will jump 5 years into the past for no other reason than that that's a painful thought or a painful memory. Then I'll jump over to this for no other reason. It's not like I look at that memory during the meditation and say, I let it go and feel joy and peace. No, I look at that identity and I say, oh, that reminds me of this thing over here. And then I look at that and it's not like I look at that and say, oh, let's open up into joy. No, I look at that and then I say, oh, what if this happens? And I am completely captivated by the identity, by the pattern, thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, thinking, feeling, stable, right? Very stable, right? That's me. Doing that, thinking that, doing that, thinking that, feeling that. That's me, right? And it's such a relief. Now I can stop fighting the joy. The time is up, right? Ding, ding, ding. Oh, it's wonderful. We got through that. But don't worry about it, right? We've got it down, right? No matter how beautiful the joy, no matter how easy, no matter how ecstatic, I've got it figured out. I just think about this, then that, then this, then that, then hold my breath, then that. You've got nothing to worry about, ego. You're safe, right? You've got a strong grip on that identity. No one's going to take it out. And, a few breathing, whatever. We'll get it figured out, right? And so I think it's indicative of trauma. I think that traumatized people, right? Traumatized people are more attached to certainty than, beautifully cared for innocent people, for example, right? The betrayals have not reached a point where there's, defense, and there's much more responsiveness and fluidity in, a loving, innocent experience than there is in shock and pain and grief and all of that. So we are a traumatic culture. And so the ego's looking for something certain to hold all that overwhelming energy off. And one of the things to hold on to is the traumatic events itself. It's called PTSD. You just loop the events over and over again. You can hang on to that level of identity, that pattern. Nobody can take it away from you. And it's very solid, right? It feels, at least I know who I am. I am the traumatized person. But joy in being a traumatized, it starts to take it away, right? It's like, I don't know who I am anymore. I feel overwhelmed. What if some I'm out of control? What if the traumatic event happens? I go, no, I got to hold on to that feeling. I've got to create stability, right? So the ego is not right. It's not wrong. There does need to be a certain pattern to recognize. I mean, if we just look in the mirror today and say, you look like a completely different person today, You're eating different, you're doing that, and then the next day it randomly changes it. Like, who am I, right? That's the question for the ego, right? I am this, right? And if you're this and it gets knocked around too much, then it feels uncomfortable for the ego. So it likes something that can't be knocked around, and heavy, dark energy tends to do a good job at not being knocked around. Right? If you're bored, cynical, bitter, and angry, and somebody betrays you, your identity is not shattered, it's strengthened. If you are innocent, grateful, moving around, and somebody betrays you, it's shocking, it's disorienting, and your identity is more vulnerable, right? And so negative identities tend to be heavy and stable and less volatile. So I think this is what my ego is doing, and I think it's what the cult ego is doing, to ensure that we have as little joy as possible, even when it's free, even when it's readily available, even when it only takes 15 minutes.